Hello, Where We Are listeners. If you're a longtime fan of this podcast or you're just joining us for the first time today, we want to tell you more about our podcast platform called Spotify for Podcasters. We've been using this platform for over a year, and it's been easy to use, and new features are added all the time. You can record and edit podcasts from your phone or computer. You don't need anything fancy, and you don't need previous podcast experience. When you hit publish, you will distribute your podcast to Spotify and everywhere else podcasts are heard. Video podcasts are also available on Spotify if that's your kind of thing. And with Spotify for Podcasters, you can earn money in a variety of ways, including ads and podcast subscriptions. But here's the thing, you can earn money, but it's a free platform. There's no catch. If you're curious or want to see what it's all about, download the Spotify for Podcasters app or go to www.spotify.com/podcasters to get started.
On the final episode of Where We Are of 2022, we'll cover some of the trends and stats and developments that that stuck out to us from the last year. You'll also get an update on Melissa. This is Where We Are. This is Where We Are. I'm Michael Ware.
I'm Melissa.
And it's good to be back. We're delayed. I know many of you are thinking, Michael, you're such a pillar of reliability. You're never late. You're always on time. Well, Melissa got in the way of that. Melissa, through her lack of professional decorum and really lack of commitment to you, the listener, forced us to be late. And so that's why you're getting this episode on a Tuesday and not on Sunday as I would have had it. Melissa, do you care to tell the people maybe an apology is in order? Perhaps a mea culpa? That's basically another way of saying apology.
Thank you for translating.
Anything to share? Do you have any explanation for yourself?
Well, we usually like to give a warning before we miss an episode or a post on our Reclaiming Hope Substack, but we couldn't because on Friday I got an excruciating kidney stone and I went to the ER and I was hospitalized over the weekend. So while I was chilling in the hospital, Michael, you could have done Where We Are just by yourself, I guess.
Well, the people want you, dear.
I'm not really sure about that. You can let us know. Which one do you like better, me or Michael? Please let us know.
Look, there is, this is the social media age. People expect access to our lives. I didn't hear you suggest once that we record an episode live from the operating room of your minor surgery on Saturday. Do you not trust the people?
I don't trust myself. I was put under general anesthesia.
Now, see, it could have been entertaining.
It could have been entertaining. It could have been like those wisdom teeth videos that you see afterwards when people get their teeth pulled. But yes, this kidney stone knocked me out, folks. It was the worst. I have had active labor in my life for 2 children. I know what that feels like. And kidney stones are just as bad. This is my 3rd kidney stone ever, and the first one I had to be hospitalized for. And now I have to go in for more procedures this coming week because it's not gone. It is still with me. I am carrying around a little stony bit.
Actually, relative to kidney stones, it's quite developed. It's larger than the average bear.
Yeah, it's a large kidney stone. My body basically said, I'm going to do the most.
Yep. This came just days into your 35th year.
Yeah, I know. I'm 34. I hate when people say it like that because I'm 34, not 35. Yes, my birthday was on Tuesday, and I had a great day. I had a great birthday. And then I arrived to the ER literally hunched over and yelling out, please help me. And the 2 front desk people who were checking in, registering folks go, as they're gathering my name, and I'm like huffing and puffing because I was at a 10 out of 10 on the pain scale. And they go, oh, happy belated birthday. And I'm like, Just get me in.
Y'all,
Thank you.
Y'all, so we were at the aquarium.
Yes.
Wonderful holiday trip with the girls. And instead, like 20 minutes in, we had just made it to the Penguins. And Melissa, who had told me, I'm not feeling well, I need to step away. So I'm like, oh, convenient. Just leave me with these two tyrants in an aquarium while you probably, I don't know, take a smoke outside. I don't know. Melissa doesn't smoke. But then I get a text saying, I think I need to go to the ER. So obviously, run the kids down. And Melissa is vomiting in the bushes in front of the National Aquarium.
With children walking around.
Saoirse was fascinated.
Saoirse was very worried.
She's like, what is mommy doing behind is this a game? So yeah.
That's
Melissa,
why we're late.
That's why we're late. I think it's a sufficient excuse. I'm glad you're feeling somewhat better, dear.
Yeah, I still don't feel great, but it's better than what it was. It was the worst.
Yeah. Plus, I can get some peace and quiet because you're not groaning and moaning in pain. How obnoxious.
You saw me cry, and I don't cry.
Come on, let me get some sleep here instead of this incessant whining. Oh, I feel like I'm having another child.
Did I have the woman flu? Like you had the man flu last month?
Hey, that sinus infection was serious, okay?
Did you go to the ER?
I felt like a real...
Did you spiritually go to the ER?
I did. Yeah.
You were there in spirit? Okay.
I was in the ER in spirit. A 10 out of 10 on the spiritual malaise scale. Oh man. All right, we do have
a lot to talk
about. Melissa, we just thought for this episode we touch on just a few of the flashpoints, kind of culturally and societally.
Yeah, versus political flashpoints.
Yeah. So last episode we covered some of the political news and developments, but yeah, we thought we'd cover some of the societal stuff outside of politics. Melissa, where should we begin?
Do you want to start with religious demographics?
Sure.
Religious demographics in particular. We have some new data both in the UK and the US, but let's start with the UK. The new data from the UK's national census, their biggest survey of the population there, they found that for the first time ever, fewer than half, so fewer than 50% of people in England and Wales, so those two countries, describe themselves as Christian. And the amount of people who said that they have no religion increased to 37.2% of the population. So that's up from 25% from the last survey. And then those who are identifying as Muslim rose 4.9% in 2011 to 6.5% in this latest survey. And by latest survey, I mean 2021, if I hadn't mentioned that. So especially for what was formerly a majority Christian country, now it's under 50% now. And it's been heading in that direction for a long time in the UK, but to actually see it specifically in England and Wales it's just,
it's a milestone.
It's a milestone. Yes, that's the word I'm looking for. Milestone.
Particularly interesting after we saw, as we've discussed on the show before, and I even read the sermon for the Morning Five.
Mm-hmm.
We saw British Christianity have sort of global influence and platform this year with the death of Queen Elizabeth, the crowning of King Charles, and a reminder of just how Christian in ritual, in sort of in structure, so much of British politics and British society is, I think it's, the humanist, secularist lobby in the UK, I'm comfortable calling it like an actual lobby. It's an actual constituency. Now, just like in the US, it doesn't represent all people who don't identify with religion. There are really inflated claims, but there's an organized secular humanist lobby in the UK that I just don't see in the States yet. There are some organizations, but I just don't see them as having impact. And in the UK, I think they're organized enough, and it's even in this BBC article, he makes exactly the head of one of the big secular humanist groups in the UK makes exactly the sort of strategically the move I'd make, which is, okay, now less than half of British society identifies as Christian. We, as a democratic issue, we need to look at these various ways in which Christianity is embedded in our processes and in our culture and our politics. Now, here's the thing, Melissa. I would venture that a significant percentage of those who would say that they're not personally religious, because of their identity as British, would be resistant to the removal of those sort of Christian rituals, from British society. So, that entire percentage of the public that don't identify as Christian, significant percentage of that block totally comfortable with, for instance, King Charles's remarks on faith. So this doesn't necessarily break out politically or culturally in the way that people might first think, but it is a significant development of, as you said, this ongoing trend that's on both sides of the Atlantic, this sort of religious disaffiliation and the fall of the decline of Christian identity in the West.
Yeah, you see it throughout Europe too, numbers looking like this as well, and you find people, if you survey them or ask them questions.
Well, and UK is, it's not the most, but UK is far higher Christian rates than other European countries.
Yes, but to speak to I wanted to speak to your point about how in Europe as well, it's not surprising the UK is going down this road, because religiosity in Europe is a lot lower, and I've always viewed Europe as a sort of anomaly rather than the future or the inevitability when it comes to regional religiosity, that type of thing. But for a lot of people in France or Germany, wherever, name a country, it's a religion of rituals that people will identify as atheist, agnostic, or as some kind of nun, and will still attend funerals, attend baptisms, even get their children baptized, participate in religious aspects of Christmas or other religious, or Easter, and still call themselves a part of that percentage who would identify as some form of nun, because they've surveyed it that a lot of people like the ritual because it is a ritual and they find it to be comforting.
Right.
And so it'll be interesting to see if the UK also goes down that route as well, where if these numbers continue to grow on the nun side and decrease on the Christian side. And you'll also see, again, with the number of people identifying as Muslims growing as well, that brings a whole other type of religiosity to the realm.
Yeah, it jumped from something like 4% to
6.5.
Yeah.
And I mean, that doesn't get anywhere near France, because France is one of the biggest populations of Muslims. But that obviously brings another religious dynamic to the country, to politics, to the social fabric. And I think that the UK is not inevitably going to go fully towards the European route, but I think the writing is pretty much on the wall. It's the United States, where we have a new Pew survey that came out this year, that came out in the last couple of years, that we're seeing that the number of Christians are declining as well, where in 2020 Christians were accounted for 64% of the U.S. population, that's including children. And those who are not affiliated with religion grew from 16% in 2007 to 30% in 2020. So we see these sort of corresponding numbers, but like the thing is that like when you think about it, again, you hinted at it already with like the monarchy and things like that. The Church of England is obviously a very powerful force. The official religion of England is, the Church of England. Like that's an official.
Yeah.
The United States doesn't have an official religion, so the comparing and contrasting that can be done here is limited in some ways. But we are talking about them separately in terms of just being interesting demographic changes.
Yeah, I mean, you'll remember in our earlier episode of Where We Are, we talked about pew numbers on the sort of spiritual beliefs of the religious nuns that showed like some like insane number believed in reincarnation, believed that physical objects could be charged with spiritual power or energy. And so, this is kind of the problem, one of the problems that like the secular humanist lobbies have, which is their rhetoric is all like, we're the ones who believe in science and,
rationality.
we're the completely rational ones. And then you like poll their members and it's like, like something more is going on here than just like a hard look at reality. And of course, I'd be remiss if I'd say, I think that those who do not identify as religious, as Christian, would benefit from taking a harder look at reality. And so, so I think it's, I think these numbers are certainly developing, going to have all kinds of political, cultural, personal. We're going to talk about mental health later on. I don't think that these trends are completely disconnected. I think the last thing I'd say on this point, just on this conversation, is that while there is a decline, we've spent a lot of time in the UK. What that doesn't mean is that there aren't thriving, vibrant,
close-knit
Christian communities that are having
committed to serving and
they're having tremendous impact
in the community. Yeah,
they're having tremendous impact on their communities and on the lives of people and
doing tremendous interfaith work, especially with mentioning like the increasing population of Muslims. Like we've seen some fantastic partnerships between Christians and Muslims in the UK. I think that's a really good point to bring up.
Yeah. Okay, what else do we have?
So one of the biggest stories of the last 6 weeks is social media's future, and this will lead into that good conversation on mental health. So pairing like the religious demographics and social media, and then looking into mental health. So we all know that Elon Musk took over Twitter several weeks ago, and all of a sudden we were starting to get think pieces and tweets and posts and all kinds of things saying Twitter's going to crash, Twitter's over. And then a few days into sort of people sort of predicting like the crash of Twitter, you see like a big essay in the Atlantic saying Instagram is over, that Gen Z doesn't use Instagram as much as millennials do, and they're mostly on TikTok and Snapchat and YouTube. And it's true, there are studies on this about, especially out of Pew again, about how much Gen Z uses YouTube. There's like 65% of them say that they're on YouTube constantly. And so it's, if Instagram is losing traction, we know that Facebook has been, and Meta broadly has been losing traction. And it seems like in a lot of ways, social media is being used by certain generations, where Facebook is mostly being used by Gen X baby boomers and Instagram millennials and Snapchat, TikTok, Gen Z. Although those aren't like clean cut lines, you can find all kinds of people who use all kinds of platforms. But we have a lot of data on how detrimental social media has been to the mental health of people of all ages, not just the younger generations, not just teens. And we've seen, articles in the New York Times over the past few years about those in Silicon Valley who work in the tech sector, who work in these different companies, saying that they don't allow their own children to have smartphones or to have access to social media. I remember reading that New York Times article, and I'll try to post it in the notes. And I remember showing it to Michael going, if the people who have built these platforms don't want their kids having the platform, what does that say? Michael, do you want to jump in here?
Yeah, I mean,
do you think social media is winding down? Do you think it's hit a plateau? Me too.
No, I mean, look, I think it's been fascinating. I was just thinking of this week. For, the last decade, Twitter has been a platform primarily where people could talk about all the ways in which they're standing up for their beliefs and all the things that people must do if they really believe something, and disinvite your uncle from Thanksgiving, or make sure you really tell him what's what and don't let him get away with anything at around the Thanksgiving table, or make sure that you're getting all of your food and clothes, whatever sourced, all that stuff. And very few people have been willing to apply a tenth of the rigor that they've been using the platform of Twitter for everyone else to their own usage of Twitter by their own moral standards. And so, you just have this kind of outrageous thing where, you feel like you could think of dozens and dozens of examples of, you shouldn't watch this show because this is the producer on it, or you shouldn't buy this because this person's the CEO. Well, Elon Musk is the CEO of Twitter. He's made it pretty clear who he wanted, what his political leanings are. He's expressed a point of view on a number of subjects. And yet, because now people it would cost people something to get off of Twitter. Mm-hmm. They just can't do it. So you get all these endless people will put in their bio their username for an alternative social media, but they're not on that social media platform. They're still on Twitter. So that's just one. No, I don't think social media is going anywhere. Certainly not in the short to medium term. Like all technologies, it will evolve. I think we are in a period in which the cycles last a lot shorter, just kind of naturally. There are so many new technologies developing, communication styles develop so frequently. So I don't know if social media, as we currently conceive of it, is going to be dominant for the next 50 years. But no, I don't think it's going anywhere because Elon Musk bought Twitter, or frankly, sadly, even because of the mental health issues, we're seeing I just don't think that the negative consequences of social media are enough to roll it back. I mean, I do think that we'll see some kind of legislation over the next 3 to 5 years.
Especially on privacy concerns. And,
concerns and targeting kids, I think 18 and under. But yeah, no, and Melissa, it is one of those things where it's amazing how early you have to start thinking about it as a parent. Mm-hmm. We have a 4-year-old and a 21-month-old, and it's like, Saoirse will ask to look at our phones to see photos, but we will often look at each other and have conversations about, if she's using our phones for photos, does that to look at photos or to watch a video together, is that building up a sort of intuition or sort of instinct to go to the phone that then will sort of have build up over time and lead into, and it. I do think that there can be an oversensitivity and just a parental hand wringing, but it also seems very relevant. I mean, I think there have been enough stories to suggest, and Jean Twenge's work is really convicting on this point, that if as parents and as people, if we're not thinking proactively about how we're engaging social media, then it has a kind of force that can override what's best for us as human beings. So yeah.
Yeah, the last thing I'll say about that, because you mentioned our kids and their ages, but there was this great New York Times article this past week on the Luddite teens who are avoiding social media altogether and even owning phones. And so I don't think social media is going anywhere in the next 5 years. I agree that's going to most likely revolutionize again, because I do think that there will be enough younger folks who want different channels, and it will depend, and by channels or apps, that will operate on sort of different norms. Because I do think Gen Alpha coming up, that's our kids' generation, and who are being mostly, I mean, obviously there's some Gen X raising Gen Alpha, there's some Gen Z raising Gen Alpha, but it's mostly being raised by millennials, that we've seen the parents of Gen Z go before us as being digital, being completely digitally connected and seeing what has gone down. And I mean, we personally know so many parents who are actively thinking about limitations of some kind in their children's lives. And it will be interesting then with those limitations, how children of the Gen Alpha generation will relate themselves to social media, if the smartphone addiction will become a thing. I mean, a lot of teens are now buying flip phones so that, the flip phone is pretty much only good for texting and calling, and that's all it's good for.
So what I'd love to see is my instinct here is to think that this is going to be just another iteration of the inequality that springs, yes, from class and resources, but also from family structure.
Yes.
So, my guess would be the kids who are thinking about buying flip phones are doing so within the context of conversations with their parents and their present involved parents, pointing things out to them, or even, I mean, we know parents who have just sort of laid down and their kids don't get smartphones. So I guess looking forward, what I'm interested to see in 2023 is, do we see, to touch on the politics a bit, do we see significant regulation take place at the state or federal level? 2, do we continue to see this sort of weird concentration of technology at the lower ends of sort of household income, and at sort of higher ends a sort of asceticism when it comes to technology? Is that a weird kind of inequality that we see continue into 2023? And then 3rd, I'm interested in young people themselves and the extent to which they sort of take this into their own hands. there are these. I was actually having dinner with some folks this past weekend and talking about Be Real and these sort of new kinds of social media interactions that are trying to react against and correct some of the worst of what has developed with social media, while keeping, they hope, some of the best aspects, the connectivity to friends, the ability to express yourself, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. It is amazing to me that the main platforms that younger people use, so that's TikTok, Snapchat, Be Real now, and YouTube, that all of those do trend towards showing you more authentically, or showing you like in your darkest moments, your happiest moments. Although, like, we're on TikTok and we see all kinds of acting and like reality TV show-esque type stuff going on there, that I would be surprised if TikTok starts to suffer from that, from the younger generation sort of sniffing that out and not wanting that anymore. And that's why Be Real getting in on the front end with this idea that, being more authentic, exactly where you are in the moment, is probably quite appealing to young people who, from literally since the day they were born, have been surrounded by social media channels where it's all about performance. And Be Real is not about performance. And I see that TikTok is starting to become about performances, and Snapchat, I'm not on it as much anymore. That I can see that one surviving as well, because you can't really perform on Snapchat too much. That's just not how it's built. But with the teen and the child mental health crisis that's connected to all of this, we just have staggering numbers right now. And a lot of the discourse over the past, since the pandemic started in March 2020, a lot of people have blamed COVID for being the main sort of cause of this rise in teen mental health issues. And a lot of the studies are now saying that it exacerbated a lot of the issues for young people, but it's not like the sole cause, because there's some, I'm going to read off some CDC numbers here. So from a CDC study, from 2009 to 2017, so way before the pandemic, depression spiked 69% amongst 16 to 17-year-olds. And then from 2009 to 2020, the share of high school students feeling persistent feelings of sadness or hopelessness rose from 26% to 44%. That's the highest level ever recorded. So that does go into a little bit of the pandemic from 2009 to 2021. And now suicide is now the second leading cause of death for children 10 to 14. So we have numbers here that are being talked about a lot because they're just so alarming. And, people call it an epidemic, and I think that's an appropriate term for it. And COVID exacerbated a lot of these issues. But you kind of go back and you look at, a lot of people are trying to find like the silver bullet of what caused it. But you look at like with the measure of this sort of exponential increase in these various areas, social media really came about around 2003, 2004 with, the Facebook that only I think college students had access to, but then MySpace was accessible to everyone in 2006, 7. It's interesting that those things started when these rates went up. Well,
right. And just to be clear, this is the argument that the psychologist Jean Twenge makes in her new book. And that's exactly the point, that, Dr. Twenge has looked at sort of the possible, various possible kinds of explanations. The financial downturn of 2007, and has found that they don't quite match up.
Yeah,
they don't quite explain what we're seeing when it comes to mental health in young people. But the smartphone and sort of the technology surrounding it does in some really striking ways. So you can read more on this if you're interested. Jean Twenge's book is iGen, the new one. I actually was able to hear Jean present on this on her new book at an event hosted by our friends at Baylor, and it's meaningful and really hits you hard when you think about all of these challenges that young people are facing.
Yeah, I mean, these numbers and, I mean, the young people we know, I mean, it just makes me think constantly when it comes to smartphone usage and social media. I don't have the exact number in front of me right now, but scientists say that we only understand like a very small percentage of how the brain works. And yet we are giving people, I mean, as young as like 1, 2, access to these things that deeply alter brain waves and how the brain is connecting and processing and relating to other people, relating to the environment, when we don't really know how the brain works. And yet we're handing out like these, these tools, these apps, these landscapes, the metaverse, when we're kind of like just sort of grappling, like we're just sort of walking around in the dark. Just reading it, that's what I think about when I think about social media and smartphones, is that we just don't understand exactly, especially with adolescent brains that are really in change mode, that are developing rapidly. We just don't know how exactly it is hitting, and why some kids, can be on social media and can have a smartphone and, fare well with both those things at hand, and others don't. I'll end my point there, but we have a few other things to talk about. Did you have anything else to say, Michael?
No. I mean, I think, look, I don't think mental health issues all boil down to sort of one cause. So I don't mean to suggest that, but because of all of the changes in social media, both in who's running it, in some of the data coming out, it is something specific to keep an eye on. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, what we haven't discussed in this episode is, there's the whole sort of disinformation, misinformation, aspect of social media as well. So it's something to look for in 2023, how this conversation develops.
And just our last sort of section on what has been sort of a tech conversation is artificial intelligence, AI. You've probably seen it in the news a lot the past few weeks. A bunch of different ways that AI is starting to integrate itself into our lives. If you're on any of the social media platforms, you've probably seen AI-generated art. You've probably seen, and we've included in the top 5 last week, articles on ChatGPT, which is basically an AI generator of words where you can give it a prompt and then it will write, short essay, long essay. We've got AI that's writing poetry. And I think that AI is just going to continue to become a bigger and bigger social conversation that is already spilled over into political conversations, but that I think there needs to be a more holistic conversation around it. And I think that politics-wise, that politicians and those, on school boards, whatever, at the local level, state level, need to be talking about this more, because, again, it feels kind of like we're sort of walking in the dark and these things are just, cropping up, and we think, how fun, it created a little, art image because I told it about, Myrtle Beach, and then it created this image, and it wasn't that funny and cute or weird or whatever. And there's some serious conversations around actual artists, human beings, and how they create art, and will AI replace the artist? I mean, that sounds like a very drastic conversation, but I think it's one to be had. Just like AI writing poetry or AI writing essays. What will that do to the learning loss that we already have out of COVID if kids are just going to a ChatGPT to write their essays? I'll end there, but do you have any comments?
Yeah, I mean, so I think this goes to a number of really big philosophical sort of questions. First is, this idea that if you can't discern the difference, then the difference doesn't matter. That if you can't discern that something is produced through AI, then what harm could it do, or what's the harm in using it, and really like what's the difference? I think that's like a pretty. I think you lead into some really dangerous places when that question becomes something that is democratized and something that people are actually thinking about in their day-to-day lives. Yeah, as you know, Melissa, my favorite novel is Never Let Me Go. And of course, at the center of Never Let Me Go is this idea that we'll try not to give too much away, but this idea that through producing artwork, people could convince the broader public of their humanity, that sort of their soul would come through. Well, what happens if we get to a point where it becomes like just widely held that there is no real discernible distinction between what can be produced by a human being with a soul and AI? And what does that do to people's sense of loneliness or the value they contribute to the world? So I think that's like a deep question that is presented by these technologies. I think at the political and social level, I think particularly like the chat GPT, just the awareness of that technology, not to mention the more creative uses that will come from it, but just the idea that it's available, and to the extent that becomes sort of widely known, it's almost like forget all the conversations or all of the projects to restore trust in politics or restore trust. All of that, however many hundreds of millions of dollars have been poured into that effort over the last decade, all of that is mere triage and mere sort of like stemming the bleeding let's put it this way. It's as if you had a patient that came in with a knife wound and you're addressing the knife wound, and then they get shot with a bazooka. It's just like this is imagine if the voter has to have in the back of their mind the doubt that a letter they received from their congressperson was actually written by someone who works for the congressman, or whether it was an AI-generated response that included inputs about their preferences, was tailored to mollify them, produce a certain kind of psychological or social response. And it gets very hard to have a society, Melissa.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like I'm an AI alarmist, and I probably am by a lot of people's definitions, but I just don't see, I mean, societally, I'm just speaking to the U.S. here. Societally, I just don't see us having much impulse control to be able to control AI towards actual real benefits towards people, and then to stem like the sort of negative externalities that will come out of the continuous development of AI. Like, you know, if we actually lived in a society that said, let's develop AI towards accessibility and equality ends, and this is exactly what we'll use it for towards those goals, while keeping it out of A, B, or C realm. I just don't see that happening, because we've already let social media and smartphones take over, and sort of it. So the reason, what I was trying to say before, and it just came to me now as I was thinking about AI, is that a lot of this stuff feels like we're playing a video game. And when we play video games, we kind of, you pretend that things aren't real, whereas we are actually in real life. We've allowed smartphones and social media to not just bring people together, but to tear people apart, that I can't see us, allowing AI to continue on in a sort of positive way. To me, it just seems like the sort of revolution in technology where it's playing with people's lives and profits over people, that I just don't, I guess I'm an alarmist. I don't see this going anywhere that is holistically, on the whole, better for everybody.
Well, it's one of those things where it's just like, this is obviously where the technology was leading to.
Yeah.
I mean, and so it's like so many other things, it's just sort of this sense of, when was a choice ever really even made? Mm-hmm. And doesn't it seem like whenever that choice was made, that we already made it mm-hmm. as a society? And so I do think it's going to be a vexing problem for us, and not to mention it's the effects on education, the effects on so many areas of life.
I mean, you and I talk all the time about how, 10 years ago, it was this huge push for every school to get funding from some foundation to, put a Chromebook in every child's hands.
Well, right. And yeah, we talked about this earlier.
And now we see, a lot of private schools are taking those pieces of technology away. And I think that kind of inequality when it comes to how much technology permeates young people's lives, I think that chasm will just grow.
Yeah. No, I think that's right. So those are some of the items that we wanted to discuss in this episode. But we're really interested, what trends, what developments. Maybe you all have some positive trends that you saw develop over 2022 at the level of society and culture. We'd love to hear them, and please reach out to us and let us know what we should have our eyes on in and for 2023. Melissa, anything you want to close out with? This will be our last episode before the new year, and so
we hope everybody has a wonderful holiday and a very happy new year. We are so glad that you've joined us this year, especially as we rebranded and joined the That Sounds Fun Network. We're grateful that you're along for the ride, and honestly, all I can say is that me and my kidney stone say peace out. My beloved kidney stone. Bye.
You got to do a bye in the voice of the kidney stone.
Oh. Bye.
It's very abbreviated. Gravelly. Yeah.
Bye.
It's the end of the weekend, but I still wanna turn up. Yeah, I still wanna turn up. All I want is to go.